Hello everyone, in today's tutorial we'll be learning how to cut and sew this very beautiful keyhole neckline bubu with this snatched waistline effect and this very stylish sleeve design. Please do not skip any part of this tutorial so that you don't miss out on any point that I'll be giving at any particular time. This bubu has this snatched waistline effect not just at the front, it also has at the back. And for this bubu I used 3 yards of this crepe fabric, and you know that this crepe fabric comes in length 60. So for a fabric that comes in length 60, I use 3 yards of it. If you want the pleat on the sleeve of this bubu to be more than 2 lines, you can see that the pleat on the sleeve of my bubu is just 2 lines. If you want your pleating to be more than 2, you should use more than 3 yards. You should use between 3.5 to 4 yards of your fabric. So with my 3 yards of this fabric, I folded it into 4 equal parts. After folding into 4 equal parts, the next thing I did was to measure the shoulder. The shoulder in this case is starting from center of the back neckline to wherever you want the sleeve to stop. It could be the wrist length, it could be the 3/4 length, it could be short sleeve length, but don't forget that you are still going to pleat it. So whatever length you are measuring now, it will still be shorter by the time you are done sewing your booby because you'll be putting big pleating. Now, the next thing I did was to mark out the neckline. For the neck width, I used 8. I marked 4 on fold of 2. And for the neck depth for the back, I used 1.5 for the back. And it's a round neckline. The front is also a round neckline aside the keyhole neckline that the front has. So for the front keyhole neckline, for the round part, I'll be using 6 for the length. And for the keyhole part, I'll be using 3 inches. So from shoulder line to the neckline for the front is 9 in total. Then I cut out the back neckline, I slanted my shoulder, and I had to transfer my fabric to the floor so that I can get a wider view, like my camera can cover a wider range. So for the front neckline, like I said, I used neck depth of 6 for the round part, and for the keyhole part I used 3 inches. So in total 9 inches was what I used for the neckline. So when I was done doing this, I proceeded to cutting out the front neckline. My name is Oluwatosin. In case it's the first time you're seeing my channel and you're welcome, please do well to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. So the next I did was to mark out the round sleeve. For the round sleeve, I used the armhole divided by 2 and I marked that. What is next is to mark out a hip line. So to mark out hip line, definitely you will not be measuring hip line wherever you are sewing the bubu for, but you can always figure it out on your fabric. And what you would do is from the armhole, measure 2.5 inches downward, that's the bust line. From the bust line, measure 5 inches downward, that's the waistline. From the waistline, measure 8 to 9 inches downward, depending on the person's height, and that is your hip line. So that is how to figure out hip line on your fabric when your fabric is on fold like this. So after figuring out this person's hip line, the next thing I did was to divide her hip by 4, and then this is a bubu. Obviously it's not supposed to be tight in any way, so I'll be adding in total 4 inches, that's 8 inch on both sides. So I'll be adding 4 inches to the hip because I want it free. Now for the lower part of this dress is going to be just a bit slimmer than the hip line. So what I did was, after dividing the hip line by 4 plus 4 inches for the hip, at this lower part I deducted 4 inches from the hip line before marking. So it's as good as saying that I didn't add that 4 inches that I added to the hip line to the lower part of the dress. Then I connected this point together. Another thing is this bubu has a cow effect from the armhole side to where the hip starts. So I proceeded to measuring and marking out the cow effect. Basically, it's just to make it bigger than the hip. So from where the armhole stops, I did not just come down to connect to the hip line and the allowance like that. I had to cow, just watch what I'm doing. So after measuring the armhole now, you can see that I'm trying to give it the cow effect. Like I had to cow it first before going back to the hip line. So I'll be using these pieces that I cut out to sew the beds that I'll be stitching on the waistline of this bubu inside to give it that snatched effect. So What is next is to mark out the point where I'll be stitching the belt that I'll be using to snatch the waistline. So I marked it out at this point before opening it up. What I did was I measured the person's nipple to nipple and then I added 1.5 inch on both sides. So a nipple to nipple is actually 9. After measuring 4.5, 9 divided by 2, I still added 1.5 inch, and I also measured the length from the shoulder. So from the shoulder, I used under her bust plus 1 inch. Then I marked this at the front and at the back to both sides. Then I proceeded to cutting out the neckline. After cutting out the neckline, this is what it's looking like at this point. So basically what is next is to start sewing this bubble. So to sew, I'm going to be joining the shoulder together. After joining the shoulder, I'll use bias to pipe the keyhole neckline first before using bias to pipe the round neckline. After that, I proceeded to stitching the belt on, I turned it and I stitched it on the part we have marked. So what is next is to start making the pleat that is on the sleeve. So I'll be using two, and I made each of them 2.5 inches wide. I measured it to be sure that both of them are the same length. So after folding like this, I left like 3 to 4 inches that I'll be using to fix my elastic. There's elastic on the sleeve as well. Then I made my pleats, considering that there is joining on the shoulder line of this bubu. When you're making your pleats, you have to make sure that the joining, all of them are on a straight line. You have to try as much as possible. Except there's no joining on the shoulder line of your bubu, then it will be easy. But because mine there is joining on the shoulder line of my bubu, I had to make sure that all the joining they are on the same line while I'm stitching my pleats together. So let me show you how I did it. After stitching my pleats this way, I stitched each of them separately first. I'll still be stitching both of them together with a straight line. I'll make sure that the joining are on the same line, and that straight stitch that I'm stitching now has to be on that joining so that everything will be neat. And when I was done, this is what it's looking like. You can see that all the joining, they are aligning, they are on the same length. So the next is to stitch the part where the elastic will pass. I used tiny elastic. I just made sure that what I folded is big enough to accommodate my tiny elastic. If at this point you are still with me and you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing and turn on notification bell so that YouTube notifies you next time I upload a new tutorial on this channel. Because on this channel, I upload sewing tutorials on daily basis. So after creating the channel for my elastic to pass and fixing my elastic, the next thing I did was to shape my bubu. To shape this bubu, I used just 1 inch from up to down. So I faced right side to right side, and then the quantity of elastic that you pass depends on the person's round sleeve and how firm or tight you want it to be. It's that simple. So after passing the elastic, face the right side of your bubu to each other, then stitch with 1 inch from up to down. If there's a need to, you fold the down of your bubu. I didn't fold the down of my bubu because the edge of this fabric is neat. If there's a need to fold it down of your own bubu, just proceed to folding the down of your bubu. And I hope that this tutorial has been helpful to someone. If it has been, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If at this point you've still not subscribed, please consider subscribing and turn on notification bell so that YouTube notifies you when I upload a new tutorial on this channel. Have you watched any of these tutorials that are currently showing on your screen? If not, you should click on any of these boxes to watch. They are very, very educating sewing tutorials, and I'll see you